Hello, today we're going to talk about the Harrington Quality Management software, the calibration module. We labeled today's talk Solving the Top 3 Problems with Calibration Software because we've had a lot of feedback from prospects and customers that they tried other software tools that didn't really solve the problem. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit, and then we'll go in and demo the software. Some quick housekeeping. Because of the number of people on today's call, the phones are muted. Use the question block for your questions, and you can download a copy of the presentation on today's webinar, or later on, if you weren't able to get a copy, we'll show you the email at the end. You can engage us and ask for it. So on the subject today, we're going to talk about the top 3 problems, what a solution would look like. We've got Rodney with us today, who's one of the Harrington software subject matter experts to go through the tool with us. And then, as always, we'll talk about the return on investment and why bother. The top 3 problems that we found when we look at companies that have bought calibration software but still didn't see the ROI have to do with these 3 things. One, people with inadequate skills. There's people just either managing the process and or doing the calibration that weren't trained and don't have access to maybe even the documentation or the procedures on what they're supposed to follow. A lot of cases, it's labor intensive, and that makes it a little error prone. And not just doing the calibration, but scheduling it, missed schedules, recording it, documents, not done correctly. But probably the most important thing that most executives don't understand when they think about, well, we're spending all this time and money on calibration. Why? Because what we're trying to do is eliminate 2 bad mistakes. And that is the cost of accepting bad product and shipping it, which has all sorts of problems, recalls, warranty, ill will, or rejecting good product, which of course is just bad business. So we'll take a look at those areas and see how we can help. I mean, we want to make sure that, one other one I forgot about is we've got some other people that were using Excel or had a project management tool. They're trying to repurpose something they already had for calibration. And it just doesn't compare to a dedicated tool that was intended for that. So, the process is pretty simple. You got to organize your equipment or inventory of the assets, define the intervals. How often are you going to check? Schedule the calibration, of course, and notify people, and then perform and document the results. And review trends. The trends is, are we seeing a lot of problems? Should we increase the intervals, do it more often? Or this one is really left out by a lot of companies because they don't have it in the database with the reporting analytics. Excuse me. That lets I'm sorry, I said that backwards. Decrease the interval if we're seeing problems, but increase the interval, is the one we're trying to look at. Hey, we've been doing it. We've been doing it for years. We never see a problem. Kick it out a little bit. All that is at lower risk and lower cost. And of course, all of this has to be in a controlled environment with security. Who can access it? Who can edit it? Who are the managers and administration? And then integration with other modules. And the reason this is important is on the screen, you see the yellow modules on the section. In addition to the calibration tool, HQMS has a document management module and a training module. And that is where you're starting to build a solution that gives me access to the current procedures, make sure that people are trained and have it all together. So, before Ronnie goes into demo, just a couple quick ideas. Reporting and charting is a big component of any tool you should look at. And one of the things that is really powerful in HQMS is your ability to configure these reports and charts. What fields do I want to see? What sorts do I want to have? What filters and components of it do I want to see? So a lot of flexibility. I think Robbie's going to be able to show you some of that. And, the HQMS in general has everything and the kitchen sink. Robust security, whether you're a medical device, aerospace, or any other highly regulated industry, any HTML compliant browser, the ability to configure forms, labels, and tables in addition to the reports, a lot of content behind it. So again, on today's demo, we're going to focus on calibration. How do we schedule and make sure we got a tool that the activities are accurately completed in a timely manner? If it's out of tolerance, we got to be able to identify the product and determine the tool. Make sure all the equipment history is there, and the flexible reporting. So with that, Rodney, I'm going to go ahead and make you a presenter. Go ahead and take it over.
All right, great. Thanks, John. Let me get the sharing here. Okay, great. Yeah, so what I'm going to do today is go through about a 10-minute or so overview in the calibration module within HQMS, or I guess technically the calibration system, which is comprised of multiple modules that come together to help you calibrate your instruments. And so where I'm going to kick it off with is just jump right in and perform a basic calibration of a tool, or also we refer to these in the system as assets. And so one area I can look to see if something needs calibrating. If you're the owner of a record, then, or the owner of an asset, then you will receive a notification when calibration is due for that record. So this is one place right within HQMS where I can click on, it says calibration due. So we'll go here, and what I'm going to do then is to create a calibration from this asset. So this is just information about the tool, what type of tool it is, and stuff like that. And so I can go over here to this calibrations area, and then simply click Add Calibration if I have the permission to do so. And just for clarity's sake, I'm not going to fill in too much information on this call here, and we'll go and click Save. Okay, so I've got the calibration record created, and technically it would be assigned to the person that I set as responsible within the record, which receives another notification. And actually, technically, before I calibrate it, if I go back to that asset record, we have this optional checkout feature. So I could use this if it's in tool control, and I can denote that I'm calibrating the instrument here. So the asset will store over time the checkout log, so we can see who's used it and when they've used it. And so then I can get back to that calibration record. I kind of went through this responsibilities area as an alternate way to get there. And all right, so basically we have this calibration procedure area at the bottom. Now, this is an example of calibrating the instrument internally. Technically, you could send it to an outside vendor. They could calibrate it, send it back. When they send it back, if they give you a certificate as a PDF, then you can upload that as a reference to this calibration record, so we have a permanent record of their certificate. But in this case, as I said, I'm doing it internally, and this is also using our optional calibration procedure module, where we can have our steps in here that define what we measure when we calibrate it. So we have a target here. This is a torque wrench, and we put it on our transducer. We get our measurement. Maybe it was 26 foot-pounds, so it passed, and I can simply go to the next record here, or the next step, and perhaps it came out at 78 here, so it's out of spec. Perhaps I could adjust it, remeasure it. I might get it down to 76 after an adjustment, and now we could potentially say it's passed. We could put some notes in here. I'm not going to waste time typing too much information there. And so that's our final step. I kept it simple here. We could have, more than two steps here. So I simply click save here, and this instrument has now passed. So all I have to do is click on this pass link. When I do that, it closes this record, so I cannot make any more notes. So if I needed to make some notes, I would click edit and put some information in here. But I'm not going to take time with that right now. So I simply click on passed, and we'll close and lock the record here. So from this calibration page, John had mentioned some reports. One of the reports that we have is a calibration certificate. And so I can click there, and this will give me information for that calibration, of this particular asset. And this certificate is also available on the asset page, where the asset page would always show the most recent certificate. If I wanted to find past certificates, I could go to those past calibration records. And so that's a PDF format, which I could print. There's other formats available here too. And one other thing on here before I leave this page, we have this history area with each record, or some people call this the audit trails area. And so this would show changes to this record over time, who changed what, and when they changed it, what the old value was, and what the new value is. So that's available with pretty much every record within HQMS. All right, so here I just jumped straight into a calibration. Now, as an example, we might want to determine what requires calibration. So that's the next topic here, is determining what requires calibration. And in this case, what I'll do is go to my asset list. And so I can go to my calibration center, jump into the asset list here. Now here I'm going to filter. Let's see, I had a filter set up for overdue for calibration. So I can choose that filter here. When I first came on this page, it was showing whatever I was last filtering by. Now, of course, if I created that calibration manually, assign it to someone, they would get an email so they could log in and calibrate this record. So this is more for someone, looking for upcoming instruments they need to calibrate. I can also change what we call our layout here. I have this one called More Fields, which will add some additional columns into my layout. You can also modify the sort order, which I've already set my sort order to sort descending by the next calibration due. And so we can see, the records popping up to the top here, what requires calibration. And technically, we have some much older instruments in our site that do require calibration also, but this is just a sample set of data. And if I clicked on one of these assets, it would go to that asset page, which I've already kind of talked about. And I could create the calibration record. So I'm not going to waste time there. The point here is, how can we find something that requires calibration? And in this filter area, I could set up different filters. If I needed more information based on like the location of the asset or the department, various fields that we set. And one other thing on this page before I go to the next topic is, when we have these list pages, with any module, I can export the list to Excel. And technically, I'm going to change the sort back. I set my layout to this one called Export, which adds additional columns. And up at the top, I have this Export to Excel button. And so that would take all my records on that list, and it puts them into an Excel spreadsheet. So this is kind of like a report, in that you can choose your columns, and then you've got your own custom list area. So this is not something that we technically consider a report in HQMS. And so that'll lead me to my next topic, which is reports and charts. So each module has various reports and charts available. And so I'm going to go to this report center here, choose asset, and I have this asset calibration schedule. And so that would kind of look similar to what I was showing on that main area there. I would click on the link there, I could filter for specific records. I already have it on the overdue, and I can simply click on launch, and then I can see the report when it downloads here. There we go. And this is sort of by next calibration date. Lots of overdue items, that we need to attend to here. So that'll help you get things under control. An example of a chart here, if I go into the calibration area, I can choose this Pareto chart. There's other charts available, which we can give more information in a demo or something if you're interested. And I've already got a filter set here where my asset name contains micrometer. And so I'm going to go ahead and launch this chart here. In these Pareto charts, what I want to point out is you're not locked in to a particular format here. So it's grouping by person responsible. Technically, I could change this to calibration result, click OK, click refresh chart. And so it's showing us across the board for our micrometers how often they pass calibration and how often they failed and then technically canceled or an open record that hasn't been calibrated yet. So again, that's just an example of one chart. As another example here, with the reports and charts, when you execute or run one, you can save that chart so you can easily run it again in the future. And so I have an example here where I have a calibration Pareto by external provider average cost. So I click on that, it jumps right into the chart where I've hid the grid lines as an option, and it's grouped by supplier, the people we send the instruments out to. And instead of showing me the number of records, it's showing me the average cost of those calibrations for each supplier. And so that's just a quick sample there of some things that we've configured. All right, so the next area here that I want to talk about is our Calibration Procedures module, which this is technically an optional module. And, what I showed there on that torque wrench asset, I had a procedure set up. So this is just the way that this procedure is set up in the system. There's actually two options here where we can link this to something within our document control system. And if I click on this little binocular icon, for example, this one here is the instructions on this particular device here. And technically, it's just some basic information. So that could be the document that maybe is from the manufacturer. It tells you how to calibrate it. And then we actually have our steps down here at the bottom. And if I click on edit up at the top, just to kind of point out, because I didn't show this in other areas yet, we have various drop-down fields in the system, and authorized users can easily add values to these drop-downs. Those authorized users, they can also modify the label for these fields if you want to put some other type of data. And so when we're entering information into HQMS, it's really just mainly a form. And so we simply type stuff in, and then we click on save, and the information is in there. So, it shouldn't be too difficult for new users to catch on here. Great. And then just as an example, we have these steps at the bottom. This is just an example where we can set up what our minimum value should be and what our maximum value should be, and ultimately what our target is when we perform that particular step of the calibration. Great. So that's our procedure module. The other module in the calibration system is our risk instruments module. And for that, technically what I'm going to do is to navigate back to one of those assets here, that asset that I was at previously. I can use my little recently viewed area in HQMS. And so during a calibration, maybe if there was an issue where the instrument was out of spec, maybe we couldn't get it within spec, and we might want some kind of an action or a follow-up activity. So we have a module built in here called risk notifications, or risk instruments. So this is just one example where I can make one of these records, and it would just give me a place where I can assign this to someone. We have a notes field where they can type in some information. So it's just a very basic way of performing an action. And then technically over time, that asset would list any risk notifications that we've had. There's other types of actions. I'm not going to go into the detail there, but for example, you could create a task from one of these records. The task module is another module in HQMS. It's a pretty simple module, or even a corrective action or a management action if we want to get more in depth into that. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rodney. We've got quite a few people on today's call that have calibration in their title, so I'm guessing most of you guys get it, and that made sense. But this last thing we want to talk about, the ROI, is where some people get messed up. Just trying to explain to the boss, why is it better to have a robust business system like HQMS calibration versus how you're doing it now? And everybody wants a specific numerical ROI for the efforts of this nature. And, that may or may not be possible. In a lot of cases, it's not possible because we don't have the data on what it costs, the average cost per calibration and things like that. So my advice is, if you need help, ask the accounting department. They have the data and they can help you with calculating the ROI, even if it is an estimate. But, some of the areas look at is operational efficiency, do more with less. I mean, long story short, the majority of the savings from putting an app like this in place, initially, the easiest ones to find are labor reduction. Less time administrating, less time reporting, less time looking for records, less time looking for certificates, etc. And then just prioritizing. The ability of, what do we have to calibrate, the kind of reports that Rodney showed you, and again, by location, by department. The one that's going to come up, and a little harder to track right now, but once you put a system like this in place, is improve the quality. And that was the whole rejecting good products and accepting bad products. So mitigate the risk. How much money you're spending because you, by mistake, accepted a bad product. And compliance is always the key in the highly regulated and audited environments. Make sure that we've got a system in place. Make sure the devices are within spec. And again, you saw from Rodney's review the idea of reporting, tracking, reviews, and just aren't available in paper-based system or standalone spreadsheet tools. The calibration is part of several modules in the HQMS enterprise. If you'd like to know more about the other systems, or as Rodney said, if you'd like to get a more detailed demo of the calibration software for your team, sales at hgint.com or 1-800-ISO-9000. A little bit about HGI. Been around since 1991, one of the first companies that ever computerized quality management. 45,000 companies, and a team that is just trying to figure out the best way to get cost-effective quality management software that can evolve with your business. Knowing that an enterprise app, like I just showed you, can be overwhelming. We've got creative ways to get your team up and running quickly and for not a lot of money. So again, we're looking at short-term operational improvements, long-term financial results through a blend of products and services. We do have some time for a couple questions. Hey, Rodney, I'm going to paraphrase it. The out-of-calibration action, the person asking, how does that work again? They said they got written up in a customer audit for not having a way to react to out-of-calibration events. Can you just go through that again real quick?
Sure. Yeah, I guess to react to out-of-calibration events, there would be numerous ways. If we used our checkout log, we could see where that instrument was used, if it was checked out for a particular project or to a particular person, on the production floor. They're using it to measure their items and stuff. The actions that we make, we can track those over time, and of course those calibration logs are tracked over time with the asset. So with all that together, I think you can really narrow down where the issues are.
Okay, we only have one more surprisingly question, and that was just a little more explanation about, we talked about the training module, that one of the top 3 problems are people that are doing the calibration aren't trained. Can you explain, and I know it's a separate module from calibration, so it's kind of beyond the scope of this, but can you just briefly describe how the HQMS training module can make sure that your calibration people are up to speed?
Sure. I think that's our next webinar, so stay tuned for that. But as far as training with calibration, of course, you can put training records into the system. You can determine who was trained and who needs to be trained, or whose trainings are expiring. Those trainings can be linked to the document system. A training could potentially be linked to a calibration record. If an instrument failed calibration, then we could launch into a training as an action. Maybe the employees are mishandling the item or just don't understand how to calibrate it. So the associations are as in-depth as you want to get, or as simple as you wish to keep them. And so keep in mind, you can just link basically any record in HQMS to any other record.
All right, great, Rodney. Thanks again for your time. If you'd like to know more about calibration or any of the rest of the modules, again, email and the phone numbers up on today's screen. Visit us at hgint.com, and we'd be happy to help. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.